Ladies and gentlemen, with due respect, I am giving a floor to a woman who flees from Africa for a prosperous future, a vocal for the against the FGM, a person representing the women empowerment and women rights into the European Union Parliament. Let's share and listen to her. Her collective work is very much vocal while she is speaking into the European Parliament as an MP. None other than Asithia Kanko, the member of the European Parliament. Floor is yours, Honorable, Right Honorable Member of the Parliament, European Parliament from Belgium.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for organizing this event and also for inviting me to speak. I would say I really do have a deep respect for everything you've been underlaying and fighting for. I'm grateful to the IGRSC for the opportunity to address you today. I was asked to give some thoughts on how we can build a just, free, prosperous, democratic, and equitable world for generations to come. So here are my thoughts. There is one almost universal truth that we all want our children to have a better life than us. History has shown that more often than not, the passing of time creates a world that is freer and fairer, a world with greater wealth and better health. But there are growing concerns that this generation-to-generation progress has stalled. If we still believe in building that better world to pass on to our children, then we need to build it together. We cannot sit back and assume that human rights, democracy, free trade, and free speech will continue to thrive simply because they exist. We must understand that progress already achieved must be defended and pushed forward every day. We all have to be the progress that we want to see. We cannot live in a world of one. We are a world of many. In these kinds of debates, there are many commentators who make their living selling doom and gloom. And while the stakes may be high, I'm not here to convince you that all is lost. They say the West is in decline. Democracy is being overrun by autocracy, that the gap between rich and poor will only grow. But I refuse to subscribe to this point of view. Instead, I believe that our world is at an inflection point, one where the victory of fairness and goodness over inequality and oppression is still the endpoint I see ahead of us. We can allow the negativity to overcome us, for autocrats to rule us, and injustice to silence us. Or we can choose to unite across borders to build a better world for us all. After all, what is the alternative? My lifetime is a story of seeking a better life, and then of doing my very best to pay it forward. I was born in Burkina Faso in West Africa, a country where, one of the countries where women are the least free. In the country where I was born, the path of my life would have nothing to do with my abilities or my determination, but by the accident of birth of being a girl. I never stopped fighting to change my own life and also to change society around me, in Africa, but also here in Europe today. I've had many blessings, but I've also been always determined to make the most out of them. I entered politics so that I could offer those same opportunities to others. Now, more than ever, I believe we must lend our voice to those that are struggling and silenced, just like some people lend their voice to women like me before. There is no doubt that we face today some significant challenges in the years ahead. I categorize these challenges into three broad baskets. First, technology, then autocracy, and equality issues. Technology is transforming our lives, mostly for the better. Imagine this COVID pandemic without satellites and the internet. Without the incredible advancements in vaccine development, we would still have to wait too long for a light at the end of the tunnel. Artificial intelligence is changing our economy and our daily lives, and democracy is enabled by social media platforms, breaking down the barriers and filters between elected representatives and their constituents. But to every positive development, there is also a risk. And with internet platforms, we see the risk that comes with breaking down the filters of traditional discourse. What we have seen on the internet is not just fake news. It's the broader blurring of lines between facts and opinions. No longer do we all share the same basic truth. Truths are contestable and interchangeable. This is a challenge that we see malign states like Russia abuse to meddle in our elections, for example. It has realized Voltaire's saying that if you can get people to believe absurdities, you can also get them to commit atrocities. And social media abuse has led to some serious atrocities, including in Myanmar recently, where it was used to incite genocide. Even in democracies, we saw domestic actors like President Trump deploy in a desperate attempt to delegitimize his own country's elections. What's the solution to this challenge? The solution will come from all of us. It is also based on media literacy. We need to learn to check what we see online, to be critical, and to not believe everything we see just because it fits with our own prejudice. The world is in a battle between the forces of freedom and the forces of autocracy and oppression that we're all fighting. At the end of the Cold War, we thought we'd entered what Francis Fukuyama called the end of history. It was believed that freedom had prevailed over the Soviet Union, but it was not to be. From Russia's aggression in its neighborhood, to its human rights violations against its own people, to its efforts to undermine democracy abroad to sustain its kleptocracy at home, and China's campaign against democracy in Hong Kong and Taiwan, its genocide against the Uyghur Muslims, or its efforts to create economic dependency and division in the free world through strategic investments, to Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, Myanmar, and countries and countless other forces that stand against freedom that we all defend. We must not just take a stand with our words, we must take a stand in our actions, because the greatest challenge to our free world is not the autocrats or dictators. It is our own democratic self-doubt. It is our own silence. We need democratic optimism and confidence. I'm far from optimistic about the future of the free world under President Biden. He will push for democracies to unite, a renewed alliance built on values rather than interest, helping to rebuild the free world so that we can rebuild the multilateral world in a democratic mold where everyone has a voice. It will not be easy, but the fight back for freedom must start now by all of us. Democracy will not prevail if we also fail to tackle the enormous injustices across our society. Inequality of opportunity both within countries and between countries. In the coming artificial intelligence revolution, automation risks leaving people behind. As the industrial world develops, we risk widening the gap between poor countries, a gap that has closed in recent years. People without a stake in society and countries without a stake in the free world will turn to nationalists and politicians who seek to find someone to blame. This political narrative has shown again and again throughout history the dark places that it can lead to. So as we enter this brave new world, we must make sure that every person has the opportunity to thrive in it through education, an inclusive economy, and making everyone's voice heard. This must include the voices of the millions of silenced women around the world. The equality of women can only be achieved through inclusions in our classrooms, our boardrooms, our courtrooms, and parliaments, in our job market and in our decision making, but also inside the houses. Finally, we cannot ignore the elephant in the room. The reason why I address you on a screen rather than in person, which I would have loved very much. I believe the ability for all corners of the world and all people to be able to thrive in the future will greatly depend on our vaccine strategy. While we are in the early stages of rolling out the vaccines in Europe, we must not forget that the world will only be safe and equal when everyone has been vaccinated. Everyone. And we must work together to achieve this goal. My friends, these are just a few of the opportunities and challenges that we face. And as I said at the start, the world is at an inflection point. So we have a huge opportunity now to do this together. And we must remember that our future is not in the hands of only our leaders or our elected politicians like myself, but that is in the hands of each of us, and each of us has the power to contribute to that change. I hope we'll continue staying in touch and working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Asithya Kanko. You are very much vocal, and you have said in a small words many things. Yes, of course, the future is in the hand of a common people, those who elect us, those who made us our leaders. So let us invest into those people, those for that reason their voice should be heard properly, equally. And I will see that we are now on a virtual, but one day, definitely one day, we will be together for in the fight to protect the human rights, to protect the vulnerable peoples, to protect the democracy across the world, and to protect the healthcare system, which is necessity at this moment, has shown us during the pandemic. And I appreciate your contribution, and I hope to continue in touch with you and to invite you on the first leg of your visit as a member of the European Parliament to our headquarters. And definitely, we will invite you to the New York when the time will be okay for the United States of America into the United Nations. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, now I am giving the floor to one of the very seasonal diplomat. Not only a seasonal diplomat, she is a very vocal for the youth development, women empowerment, and as well as she is serving the cause of a one nation, which has been taken the freedom 13 years back, a small country in Europe, but very effective. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is given to the Her Excellency Miss Tuta Sajatya, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Kosovo. Excellency, floor is yours.
Ambassador, thank you very much for including me in this very interesting, very important discussion. I want to thank you for organizing this event and bringing together people from all around the world to discuss about our power and our ability to reshape the world. Esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be among you in this important event. Human rights are the foundation of United Nations Universal Declaration, showing the value to whole world. COVID pandemics exposed our weaknesses in many dimensions. It even more emphasized the lack of human rights and taught us to turn this issue with more energy and more new grounds for COVID time, whether inside, but unfortunately women and children had augmented volume of violence against them. Access to health facilities and medicine as elementary human rights affected mostly most vulnerable ones. 2020 put the whole world, countries, government, people, in an unprecedented situation we were totally unprepared to deal with. Even simple masks and gloves were not available in March and April of last year, when pandemic started to spread quickly around the world. Unknown virus took death tolls more than any war happened before. It left a lot of people sick and without proper medicine. It closed businesses and travels. It's now a full year of the world living with this virus. COVID-19 devastated our economies, crushed governments, turned jobs and education to virtual, left without jobs millions of people, confined people to their rooms, unable to move around. Women, myself as an activist for women empowerment, I know that women were unproportionally impacted by these pandemics, with increasing of domestic violence, going out of businesses, lacking the access to health care and education. COVID-19 taught us many lessons, taught us, and we learned that the world is more connected than ever in every aspect. It showed solidarity in many cases, but also it showed lack of solidarity, like now in vaccine time. It showed us that whatever happens anywhere in the world, it will sooner than later affect us, whether we are inside our homes. We learned how weak are our health systems, how weak are our education and economy. There won't be a return to old normal. The new normal will be very different from what we used to know. And it will need our joint efforts to create the new normal that will suit the needs of people. Innovation needs to be fast forwarded. And we saw that innovation really had the strong impact with vaccine, with Zoom meetings like this, and other platforms, with e-commerce, with e-education. Innovation needs to be fast forwarded. Pandemics touched unproportionally most vulnerable, poor, minorities, women, and children. This pandemics taught us also the strength of misinformation, the strength of infodemics or fake news, unverified news as sources that grew during these pandemics and affected people's mental health, governments, elections, and many other things. I might say that the world now is operating as in safe mode of Windows and preparing for the adaptation to the new normal, to the virtual one, and hopefully with vaccination to the new normal communication. So what we need, I think that we all over the world, we need to reshape our health systems. Universal health coverage, not to be only for privileged ones, because wherever the new pandemics start, it will affect all. We have to immunize the whole world, so can we be safe in our houses. We need education that teach human rights. And we need the legislation that protect human rights. We need to enforce technology and innovation to be able to cope with the next challenges that the world might face. We need to fight strongly misinformation and ignorance that flourished using the platform of social media. And we need to include women in every decision making to make the world a better place for all. Together, we have the power to reshape the world. What a nice, what a strong message. And that cannot happen without full respect of human rights. Ambassador Khan, thank you so much for organizing this incredible event, and hopefully see you and others live. Thank you.
Pandemic, I was in Kosovo to meet my brother and my best friend, Prime Minister Handraj. Prime Minister Handraj is a life member of the International Human Rights Commission, for your information. And I was in the university with the students in the Kosovo University. I mean, in Tran, I mean, Pristina. I mean, in Ab University, and I really inspired the young generation of Kosovo uh, for their thoughts about democracy, equality, justice, and human rights. Obviously, you are the one nation who can understand the price of these things. Definitely, you are very much right that spread of the misinformation and disinformation and propaganda is a very major issue at this moment, not only in the electronic media, in the print media, also into the social media. And it is a very deadly virus which is inserting in our society, in our communities, and we have to fight for to end this also. We are working on many dimensions. Obviously, COVID-19 has teaches us so many things. Uh, it teaches us that how weak we are, how weak our governments, how weak our systems, and how weak the leadership is. I am having no doubt to say this word that this pandemic has shown the resilience and courage of a women leader instead of the men leaders. I'm not making any distinction, but it is a time that we men should admit that we are having a failure because of our uh, uh, gender superiorness, which is killing the whole society and the world as well. So let us to work together wherever you are, wherever we are having a common goals to protect the planet, protect the humanity, and protect our institution which are serving and delivering to the peoples, those who are living in our country. Thank you, Your Excellency, Deputy Foreign Minister of the Republic of Kosovo. Now, uh, today, in this webinar, there was a one legend leader was expected to be addressed. But unfortunately, in the today morning, I got his message that he is ill, and obviously he is an aged human being also. We all wanted to listen to him because he served the country and people and the region more than 3 decades as a leader. Obviously, his political career is more than on a 5 decades. His Excellency, the President of Maldives, Mamoon Abdul Gayoom. Everybody, every leader in the world knows him just because of his stand, his integrity, his dignity, and his resilience and courage to protect the democracy and to enshrine uh, the principles of the human rights. But unfortunately, he is sending us a video message, video speech in 1 or 2 days as he will be feel well. And on other hand, her daughter, she served the nation in UNFA, UNFPA. Her career starts from there. She served during the tsunami, and her efforts and struggle to serve the humanity during the tsunami, which hit the Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Bangladesh, and all the entire region. And that was the biggest disaster. Still, we didn't learn. The humanity and our leaderships are never learned from that disaster, that how much the climate change is making the crisis for our coming generation and for our planet. Ladies and gentlemen, I am giving the floor Mrs. Dunya Mamoon Abdul Qayyum, former Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Maldives from 2013 to 2016, and now she is one of the intellectual, and she is the women rights activist as well. Her Excellency Dunya Mamoon, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Chairperson, Ambassador Muhammad Shahid Amin Khan, it is a great pleasure and an honor for me to join this very esteemed gathering of the World Summit 2021 and to address you all. At the outset, let me apologize on behalf of my father. As the chairperson mentioned, a very well-respected leader in South Asia and across the world, and the leader who brought the issue of climate change to the attention of the whole world, I would say, initially in the 1980s, when many people did not actually believe that climate change was happening and impacting especially small islands like my country, the Maldives. As the Maldives' first female foreign minister, I had the honor to implement a foreign policy that was based on the ideals and values of human rights, equality, democracy, and freedom. During my tenure, from 2013 to 2016, I had a team of over 80% women working with me. I was able to maintain the Maldivian pride, even as we faced unfair treatment from many international institutions. I subsequently also worked at the Health Ministry, focusing on international health. These experiences gave me a unique vantage point from the perspective of global issues and international health. Last year, I completed a master's in law and diplomacy at the Fletcher School, Tufts University in the US. The COVID-19 pandemic hit the world during my study. It caused me to pause and reflect on its impact on our communities, particularly on women, as well as the role of leaders and leadership. As we continue to face this global challenge, leaders have a huge role to play in giving hope and in providing guidance. When the pandemic hit us, my attention was drawn to the women who had shown outstanding leadership in successfully attending to the very complex challenges posed by this pandemic. As the situation evolved, it became clear that a handful of women were exemplifying to the world how particular skills were essential in handling this global crisis. The skills these women leaders showed stand out as an example for future leaders. The COVID-19 pandemic, of course, is one of the worst global crises and security threats that the world has faced in recent memory. With current infections amounting to well over 100 million cases across the world and more than 2 million deaths, the situation looks bleak across the world. Those who are elderly and with other comorbidities are at a risk of severe disease and subsequent death. Though there are some experimental drugs in use for treatment, there is no known cure. Lockdowns, physical distancing, wearing face masks, and hygiene measures have helped to bring down the soaring numbers across the world. And indeed, vaccines have brought us the much needed hope that an end may be in sight. But there is a long way to go till we are able to provide equitable access to vaccines and to also vaccinate people to a level that will help in halting the spread of this very deadly disease. While everyone is facing unprecedented challenges, as the speaker before me mentioned, women are bearing the brunt of the economic and social fallout of COVID-19. Women who are poor and marginalized face an even higher risk of COVID-19. About 70% of the global healthcare system we know is comprised of women, which puts them in the front line as responders and exposes them to a much higher risk of infection. Yet, women are still underrepresented in positions of power. Strategic planning of emergency response and recovery is overwhelmingly dominated by men. There is a need to improve gender equality in policy making and to work together to advance women's leadership and to empower women. Many key developed countries with advanced health systems and the technical ability to respond to pandemics have failed to contain and control the spread of the virus. This is due to the lack of political leadership and due to denial of the severity of the pandemic. My own country, Maldives, which is almost totally reliant on tourism, has been hard hit by COVID-19. With continued hard work, however, we have managed to bring a second surge back into control, and we have opened up for tourism. However, we are now battling a third wave of the pandemic in our capital. Excellencies, for my research, I selected 3 leaders: Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand, Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany, and President Tsai Ing-wen of Taiwan as case studies of successful female leaders who had exhibited spectacular leadership skills, especially during the first phase of the pandemic. These leaders have been widely acclaimed by the media and the academia as having shown outstanding leadership. Rather than focusing on whether or not women are better leaders than men during a time of crisis, my purpose was to analyze how these 3 women handled the situation and the skills they had displayed, which had resulted in a successful outcome for their countries. The aim was to shed light on the importance of the particular skills required for effective leadership. These leaders were able to earn the trust of their people through effective communication, empathy, and solid actions based on scientific evidence. Overall, we have seen many male leaders exhibiting macho-ness and hypermasculinity, which has not worked well in terms of the crisis that we have faced globally with COVID-19. And as devastating as COVID-19 is, it has also provided us an opportunity to rethink and reimagine a better world, and even in the midst of all the chaos and despair. One such change or one such hope I see is the emerging redefinition of a leadership for the future. The argument that women make far more compassionate, effective leaders has grown in popularity during the pandemic, as many male leaders face criticism for taking unnecessary risks. I'm particularly inspired by Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand, who has recently won a landslide victory in the New Zealand election. Her popularity has increased, not just in New Zealand, but abroad and across the world due to her very effective leadership in bringing COVID-19 into control in her country. When COVID-19 hit, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern acted quickly, bringing the country together under her often repeated slogan, "Be strong, be kind." In early March, she ordered any arrivals to New Zealand to self-isolate. And by the end of March 2020, the borders were closed to almost all non-citizen and residents, and a nationwide lockdown had been put in place. The policy of hard and early appears to have worked. The economy suffered a massive blow, but now New Zealand is virtually COVID-free. Empathy, good communication, as well as reliance on science and listening to experts has been skills that have allowed these leaders to shine during this crisis. Analysis of the leadership skills have shown that women leaders have actually taught us to bid farewell to typical leaders who are tough, bold, and reckless. The new debate on leadership, I believe, is leading to a more balanced perception of leadership as based on increasing group welfare and not just individual showmanship. The new leaders of the future, both male and female, have much to learn from the example of these outstanding 3 female leaders and the leadership they have demonstrated during this crisis. Reliance and trust in leaders is of paramount importance as the world faces the surging and continuing crisis caused by COVID-19, and there are yet many other global challenges that we may face. Thank you very much once again. It has been a pleasure to join and to hear from my colleagues and to contribute to the importance of us working together to promote human rights, equality, and also the empowerment of women in facing the global challenges together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I hope and I wish that as you given the example of the many other women leaders, I wish that although the Islamic countries, I am having a pride to work with that women who've been the first ever female head of the government in Islamic countries. And from that time, I met the President Mamoon. He was one of my ideal in a politics, in a diplomacy, and in a leadership skills. Excellency, we hope that one day you will be the president of your own country, and I hope that the women of Maldives are taking the lead into it. And thank you very much for your valuable time. We will look forward to welcome you in person one day as the pandemic will allow us. And these all participants, those who are today in a summit, I'm sure that the one day I will gather them in person at one place. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it's the time to move forward. And I am giving the floor to the former elected reserve member of the Swedish Parliament, Ambassador at Large of the International Human Rights Commission, His Excellency Malik Naseem Ahmed Khan. He is himself
Thank you very much.
He is himself is a human rights activist, advocate, and the most prominent politician into the Sweden. Obviously, in European Union, he somehow he takes the lead to influence the European Union to make some laws on human rights. So the floor is yours, Excellency Ambassador Malik Naseem.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Chairman. Actually, I had the topics I received, so I was prepared to speak on those topics. But our Ambassador, Secretary General spoke from the heart about the situation and has come back in his homeland. And then Dunia Mamoon has said, as she has said, she has worked and experienced. I want to just let you know all that I have been living here in Sweden for the last 42 years and working with the refugees from different countries, from Kosovo, from Bosnia, from Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka. I worked with the Swedish Immigration Board for more than 10 years. And after that, I criticized many things, in that policy. And some of my Swedish friends said, why don't you come into the politics? So I joined the politics. Alhamdulillah, I got the chances to speak on the policies for the refugees and the conflicts, Together with the Ambassador Shahid, our chairman, and Abid Nadeem, so we have raised the questions about the refugee crisis and the international conflicts, We have listened to Gabriela Cuevas also, what she said in his speech. This is all the words we are talking. The president of Ecuador, I got the chance to talk to her also when we had a little problem in the connection, that we are working on it, we are all talking about it. We have seen from the last 75 years what is happening. The speech, our Secretary General, he just said some words about the situation in Kashmir. We have witnessing the situation in many other countries. I think, as again I say, Gabriela Kevas, she said, now it's not only the words, now the action. If we look back into the pages of the history, then it will not be difficult to deduce that despite our collective diplomatic efforts, we are unable to convince the authoritarians, autocratic, or theoretic states to honor their international human rights obligations. Under Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other human rights conventions and the treaties, the experience of the last more than 7 decades has proved that efforts through diplomatic channels are not yielding positive result, and the world is now facing a serious refugee crisis which is worsening day by day. It is the high time for the international community, even in my own country, I say, to reconsider their approach towards enforcement of the basic human rights and the regime who are violating the rights of their people with immunity, resulting in genocide, crime against humanity, should be prosecuted before the International Court of Justice. Our Deputy Human Rights Commissioner, she said in Geneva, is it not the right time now to bring all those who are violating these treaties? We just say, we sit in the conferences, diplomatics, they meet each other. What they call, bring that country in the gray list, black list, or the sanctions against the country. But as a human rights activist, it's difficult for me to accept the sanctions on a country because the poor people, I say the poor people, they who face these problems, the elite, they enjoy. Today, I suggest, I hope every one of you will consider it and will back me that now is the time, as we do with the war crimes, to bring them to the court. I think now all those leaders, all those parties, all those parliamentarians, those who are violating the international treaties, the International Convention of Human Rights, Universal Declaration, even if their own country's constitution, putting them, their citizen, in jail, prosecuting them, not giving them the freedom of religion, belief, and expression, bring them to justice now. It is the high time. Bring those leaders, not the countries with sanctions. Those leaders should be brought to justice and give them that sentence they need, because it is the high time. It's not the time only to talk. We have been talking, we have been working. International Human Rights Commission is working from the last many years on the rights, on every platform. I think now we need the support of your leaders, all the leaders listening to me. We need your support to bring up in the United Nations, in Geneva and Brussels, that now we should bring them to justice, those leaders and those parties. Thank you very much, Ambassador, my friends.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Malik. This is an high time. We have to bring all perpetrators, oppressors, violators of human rights before the law. And it is our struggle which has made the International Human Rights Commission unique, that we, despite pressure despite the difference of opinion, we stand on the one point that human rights must be protected with its force, no matter, and it should not be a political one. It should be enforced as a fundamental one. This is our opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor I am giving to, I am trying to make it the gender parity, although the women's here are much more than the men's. So we have, the man must have a passion to listen today the women's, because the women's are in majority today here, and I am
That's a good
trying.
sign.
I'm trying. Yes, I'm trying my level best to make the gender parity so that we can say that International Human Rights Commission is not only doing gender parity, not only advocating the human rights, they are very much doing the gender parity as well on their all actions and all levels. Ladies and gentlemen, now the floor I am giving to the one and only a woman. She is a very vocal for women empowerment, freedoms, fundamental freedoms, and she is the one who is a very vocal against the disparities and the wrong policies in her own country. None other than Cecilia A. from the United Kingdom. She is inspiration for the young generation, a leader of the young generation from United Kingdom. Cecilia, this is a time, floor is yours.
Wow, what an introduction, the one and only. I can't say I've ever been introduced that way, but no pressure. I'll try and live up to it. And I wanted to say, I wish you chaired everything, Ambassador, starting with the men should take time to listen to the women. That would be great. So firstly, good afternoon from the UK, Excellency, ambassadors and esteemed guests. Thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak at this summit. And so let me introduce my background. As the ambassador said, I'm Cecilia Jastrzębska. I'm the vice chair for a national executive committee for the UK's oldest political think tank, named the Fabians. And I'm a feminist foreign policy officer, which I think is an excellent title for the international network, as well as a senior policy advisor in the UK. I've campaigned for humanitarian causes for as long as I can remember. So we've talked about the COVID-19 pandemic a lot today, and justifiably so. But I'm going to talk to you about a very different kind of pandemic and the human rights violations that are happening as a result. The World Health Organization defines a pandemic as an epidemic occurring worldwide, crossing international boundaries, and usually affecting a large number of people. We know all too well the disease that has brought the world to a shocked and sad standstill. But what we don't see is the one that already exists, one that this pandemic is in fact already exacerbating. Not a zoonotic disease, a disease that is written into the genetic signature of our society itself, a disease etched into the heart of our genomic architecture as a collective whole, a disease so insidious and so powerful that in 6,000 years of civilization as we know it, we still have not managed to expunge it. What am I talking about? I'm referring predominantly to feminicide, the gender-related murder of a woman by a partner, ex-partner, or family member. and feminicidal violence generally. Rather than bats and pangolins, the pathogenic microbial agents of this disease walk among us and are often people we know. As found by the UNODC's global study on homicide, a total of 87,000 women were intentionally killed, and that's just in 2017. More than half, 58%, which translates to 50,000 women, were killed by intimate partners or family members. And more than a third, 30,000 women, killed in 2017 were murdered by their current or former partner. Remember that next time you see the question, why didn't she leave him? Many of these women had already left. Every day, this killer takes an average of 137 lives around the world. Congresswoman Martha Tagle from the Citizens Movement Party in Mexico said, "The deadliest pandemic for women in our country, more than the coronavirus, is feminicidal violence." You might have heard of Karen Ingala Smith in the UK. She founded the pioneering project Counting Dead Women, and she found that femicide has actually tripled since the first lockdown began in the UK in March last year. And in Mexico, almost 1,000 women have been killed since the start of last year, up 8% on the previous year. National helpline calls have increased by a third in France, and Spain has also seen a catastrophic rise in domestic violence, implementing the Mazzarella 19 campaign, encouraging victims to ask for Mask 19 in their pharmacies to call for help. We have a UK equivalent in Boots, where consultation rooms were made as accessible safe spaces for survivors of domestic abuse or violence. But this shadow pandemic has a further reach than just domestic violence, and media reporting is also part of that problem. The media has regularly reductively attributed the killing to the circumstances rather than the perpetrators. For example, the newspapers such as The Sun in the UK framing it as coronavirus murders, and The Telegraph as self-isolation murders. This constructs an insidious narrative that the virus is not only an accelerant to feminicidal violence, but that it is in fact to blame. And further implies that these murders and episodes of coercive control will dissipate once the lockdown ceases, or 3 lockdowns cease, when in reality, they existed long before those lockdowns and will exist long after. The restrictions of lockdown can expedite the transition through the stages of violence by providing a trigger, a catalyst, if you like. But it must not be characterized as the reason in itself, which can play into a whole climate of impunity, with killers effectively being exonerated from their crimes in the court of public opinion. So what else has happened apart from domestic violence increases on the women's side? Reports of street harassment, both in numbers and threat level, have also increased. You probably wouldn't expect it because you think everyone's indoors, but it's happening more. A study involving 1,000 women by Plan International UK showed that women perceived street harassment as worse and as occurring more frequently, with 1 in 5 reporting having experiencing it since the lockdown. I have personally lost count of the times that men have harassed me and my friends. It is a crime and hopefully will be made one. It's not a compliment. And I'm glad that you mentioned the economic fallout, Junior, and I'd like to build on that. Women are also the comparative precariat in the pandemic, being 3 times more likely to be impacted worse financially, as they are radically overrepresented in low-paid, insecure sectors, such as care, retail, and hospitality. When I represented the UK as the British South Asian Youth Summit delegate, Baroness Verma, who chairs a UN Women Committee, said she will always now seek to address climate change first, because the worst effects of climate change will be on the world's poorest, and the world's poorest in terms of majority representation will be women. Think of it like intersectional feminism. Black women are going to get it worse. LGBTQIA+ Black women will get it worse. And disabled LGBTQIA+ Black women would get it even worse. A cascade effect happens. And those discriminations, that bias, all of that intersects. There's another dark side to this shadow pandemic in the form of an international assault on women's bodily autonomy, our dignity, and a threat to our lives. I'd like to take this opportunity today, actually, to challenge a narrative that I'm sure you are all familiar with. For decades, we have been conditioned into believing that the contentious debate around abortion comes down to a binary decision, pro-life or pro-choice. It's a seemingly obvious demarcation to separate views on apparently opposing ends of the political spectrum. Take a second, indulge me, to think which camp are you in, pro-life or pro-choice? Now scrap that completely. What if we realized this is a false dichotomy? Bear with me. The pro-choice narrative germinated from the very self-evident idea that it is literally a right to choose what we do or don't do with our bodies. If a draconian government bans abortion, the woman loses that freedom to choose and is consequently exposed to substantial risk, of course. For example, she might have to go and undergo a really dangerous termination. She might have the threat of jail. In some countries, still face the death penalty, even when suffering a miscarriage, rather than attempting to abort. And of course, there's the risk of maternal death. It is not a fallacy to call it a right to choose at all. That's correct. However, the problem lies in the fact that it is deceptively framed as mutually exclusive with abortion, otherwise known as pro-life. So the pro-life argument purports that women should not have abortions for a variety of reasons. Essentially, the embryo or fetuses should have a right to life. But what that actually translates to in real terms is these embryos or fetuses' rights supersede the mothers, who are for legal purposes suddenly considered secondary citizens in the eyes of society. Pro-lifers often define the right to life at different points, which some right at the moment of conception, others at varying stages of gestation, making the argument more convoluted. But the baseline is proponents are primarily occupied with protecting life for religious reasons or otherwise. This is otherwise known as the exhausted hypotheses fallacy, the law of excluded middle. What does that describe? A statement that falsely claims something is an either-or situation, when there's actually at least one other valid option. The idea of irreconcilability between the two stances is the product of a long-standing patriarchal system of setting women up as collateral. It deliberately pits conservatives and liberals against each other in a constant game of identity politics. By relentlessly emphasizing this choice, swathes of the population are duped into missing a far more peaceful conclusion, which is one can be pro-life and pro-choice at the same time. One can disagree with a woman having an abortion, pro-life, but still respect her right to choose, pro-choice. And ultimately, anyone who disagrees with another's decision should not be able to prohibit them from taking that course of action. Just as a Christian would be legitimately condemned for ripping a headscarf from a Muslim, male-dominated governments cannot be legislating against women's rights just because They object to our decisions. Imagine for a second, just imagine the furor if governments forced men to have vasectomies. Really think about it. Imagine if governments around the world rolled that out right now. Never. It would never, ever happen, because society values male freedom much more than women's. Many governments have exploited this pandemic to further restrict abortion rights, such as Poland. I'm sure you know about the protests. The DUP in Northern Ireland, despite having voted to legalize terminations, who have refused to roll out abortion services. Women from Northern Ireland had to do 16-hour round trips on the ferry back through the UK during a pandemic to get an abortion. Can just imagine how stressful an abortion is with that piled on top. These governments are taking the Churchillian route, who famously said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." But all people deserve physical liberty, not just men. Bodily autonomy should be an inalienable right for all. And we need to recognize not only the false dichotomy we're being duped into, but the fact that reproductive rights must be upheld without question. The data is clear. More abortions and unsafe ones actually happen in countries where the government is more restrictive. Yes, you heard that right. When you have a liberal government policy on abortions, less death happens. And that obviously includes women as well. Now, I've talked about the economic impact, domestic violence, feminicidal violence, abortions, and there's so much more to it as well. We know that women are picking up the slack when it comes to domestic chores. We know that women and gender pay gaps are getting wider. We know that women's academic submissions are falling, that they are much more likely to lose their jobs. Just look at the data in the United States. Almost 75% of the workforce that lost their jobs were women. So that's building on an already existing gender disparity and gender pay gap. We're going back 50 years, and if we're not careful, we'll go back further and further and keep backsliding. Ultimately, there is no cure-all vaccine to this shadow pandemic. The infection isn't localized. We can't simply surgically remove the tumor on the operating table of the world. But publicly dismissing misogyny in its forms, all of its forms, and discarding the tools with which to fight it is the equivalent of our body as a collective whole having an autoimmune reaction, fighting itself and shooting its frontline workers. We must actively recognize this systemic issue, implement early unconscious bias training, increase female representation in parliaments across the world using affirmative action. No, we are not an meritocratic society as much as I would love to be, and take a holistic approach to improving routes of accountability for crimes against women, small and large. It's all on a spectrum. That's by no means an exhaustive list, believe me, but putting the issue front and center of the agenda spotlight now is a good place to start. The Istanbul Convention as an embodiment of active recognition must be upheld, and we need to do more, not less, to close ranks against the common enemy that is violence against women. COVID-19 both exposed and exacerbated the stark inequalities that rip apart the fabric of our society. It has become unmistakably clear, it's vastly incommensurate with that on men. Ambassador Malik said earlier to us that human rights are only words unless we respect the humans, and mentioned the disparity in the societal privileges that men enjoy and women do not. So I say to you, women's rights are human rights. An attack on a woman is an attack on all of us, on the very heart of a democratic, fair and just society. Silence is compliance. I cannot stress that enough. So I invite you all to stand with me against gender discrimination in your home countries, in your conversations, and in your everyday lives, because that's where the real problem and damage happens. I will leave you with a sensational quote by Australian feminist and founder of the charity The Cova Project, Gina Dunn. Feminism isn't about making women stronger. We are already strong. It's about changing the way the world perceives that strength. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Yes, of course, gender inequality remains a critical human rights issue, despite significant progress in the recent years, but in some aspects, not at a whole. Gender equality is also still a long way to go. As the World Economic Forum describes that it will take another century to achieve the gender parity and equality and to end the inequalities. But efforts to be continued. If we are doing the efforts together collectively, obviously the one day will come, and hopefully it will be soon, that discrimination against the women, inequalities will end, and so that the International Human Rights Commission is very much determined on this aspect which you all highlighted. I hope that whatever you highlighted you will be also writing down to send us, so that we will make some suggestion on the international platform on your names as well in our reports, that they should take an action, because you know we can talk very too much over the inequalities, over the discrimination, over the human rights violation, but we have to also find out its resolutions, and the resolution is more important than the our talks that will act particularly to enhance the efforts which are ongoing for the women empowerment and equality and to end inequality. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now it is a time my fellow men speakers have to be shown the little patience, because as I told earlier that there is a woman. If you will see on a speaker list of speakers, the women are much more than the men, so I am giving a time to one more female keynote speaker, a guest speaker. She is an advisor to the Minister of Women and Family and Seniors in Tunisia. She is a woman empowerment advocate and one and only in the, we can say that in the Arab countries, that the peoples, how they are moving forward. And today I am very much proud. I am feeling proud that all the women's are fighting for the women's, and the men's are standing beside them. Not just standing beside them, they are a partner of your struggle. So we have a passion to listen to the women. Madam Right Honorable Hala bin Yusuf, Advisor to the Minister of Women, Family and Seniors, Tunisia. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And Dear Excellency, very happy to participate with you today and happy to participate on behalf of Tunisia in this meeting, which addresses a very important thematic. I apologize because I will speak in French. Votre Excellence, Mesdames, Messieurs, c'est pour moi un réel plaisir d'être présente aujourd'hui avec vous toutes et tous pour participer au World Summit 2021. pour renforcer le leadership des femmes, ô combien important en cette période de pandémie Covid-19 et de ses exigences. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de vous exposer la situation dans notre pays, comme dans la plupart des pays émergents. La Tunisie et sa population subissent les effets de cette pandémie Covid-19, tant au plan social qu'économique. Fort heureusement, notre système sanitaire a jusqu'ici résisté. En revanche, divers aspects de la vie sociale se sont dégradés suite à la mise en œuvre de dispositions visant à contenir et enrayer la propagation du virus. Comme partout ailleurs dans le monde, les difficultés de vie ont provoqué un regain de stress et de dissension au sein des familles, se traduisant à des degrés divers par la montée de violence envers les femmes et les enfants, mais aussi des problèmes économiques et sociaux touchant toute la population et les femmes en particulier. À titre d'illustration, les remontées d'informations indiquant que les femmes sont les premières à être touchées directement par les changements dans un environnement incertain et complexe qui demande la mobilisation d'une multitude de personnes. La lutte contre la pandémie Covid-19 demeure toujours la grande priorité de nos dirigeants pour assurer les meilleures conditions de réussite et d'équilibre pour les deux sexes dans les fonctions d'influence et de pouvoir au sein de nos sociétés. Il existe malheureusement encore de fortes disparités sur la manière dont sont perçus les hommes et les femmes dans leur aptitude à exercer des postes de pouvoir. Nous devons donc collaborer et renforcer le leadership féminin dans la transformation de notre pays et de nos continents respectifs. Conformément au programme mondial de développement durable à l'horizon de 2030 et pour mon pays et continent à l'agenda 2063, l'Afrique que nous voulons. Force est de constater que nous n'avons pas encore suffisamment un vaste échantillon d'expression de leadership féminin qui permettrait de positionner le leadership dans un nouveau contexte de parité. Il est plus que temps de revoir la définition du leadership pour la rendre plus multidimensionnelle. Et repointer la situation des femmes dans plusieurs pays demeure injuste et insoutenable, et surtout que la pandémie du Covid-19 et ses incidents sexo-spécifiques disproportionnés ont augmenté cette vulnérabilité pour faire en sorte que les gains acquis puissent se dégrader et dans certains cas anéantis. En commençant par la façon dont nous voyons la répartition du pouvoir, du travail et de l'argent par rapport au genre. Ce constat nous pousse à tirer la sonnette d'alarme et dire qu'il est temps que les femmes, dans toute leur diversité, comptent vraiment dans l'économie de leur pays respectif, à commencer par une stratégie de relance du Covid-19 intégrant le genre, sinon nous risquons de revenir sur les dernières décennies de progrès en matière d'égalité des sexes. L'égalité des genres doit être intégrée au tissu même de la prochaine génération de politique économique mondiale et notre présence aujourd'hui au World Summit est une nouvelle occasion pour pousser un nouveau cri de ralliement à d'autres progressistes féministes, hommes et femmes, à se joindre au dialogue et à présenter leurs propres idées sur la manière de rendre le système économique européen post-Covid-19 plus juste. Alors, travaillons pour renforcer l'approche genre, récemment associée aux théories de leadership et à l'accès au poste de leader. Encore une fois, mentionnons que cette différence de genre est le fruit des préjugés socio-culturels qui se réfèrent au modèle masculin et marginalisent une bonne partie des compétences dans l'entreprise, à savoir les compétences féminines. D'où le constat que les environnements paritaires conduisent à la prise de décisions plus saines, solides et consensuelles. Personne n'est sans savoir que les difficultés rencontrées par les femmes en raison des stéréotypes de la conciliation travail-famille, des absences dues à la maternité et des politiques d'entreprise mal adaptées aux particularités de la condition féminine font en sorte que peu de femmes atteignent les plus hauts échelons de nos organisations. À cet effet, je souhaite vous faire part d'une première en Tunisie, en mai 2020, qui est la consécration du principe de l'égalité et de la parité lors de la désignation des représentants des participants publics dans les organes d'administration et de contrôle des entreprises publiques. Cette représentativité par sexe doit respecter, dans tous les cas, un minimum de 40%. Sans oublier que la Tunisie, le 3 décembre 2020, venait d'adhérer à la Coalition internationale pour l'égalité salariale, EPIC. Nous sommes aussi en train de travailler et multiplier nos efforts pour l'autonomisation des femmes rurales et l'inclusion économique des femmes sans distinction. Et nous sommes bien conscients des limites de cette action qui bute encore et en permanence sur la persistance de représentations sociales et culturelles désuètes et des stéréotypes qui accablent. Toutefois, les efforts entrepris en dépit de ces faiblesses sont encourageants. Restent les défis que pose le XXIe siècle. Changement climatique, santé, environnement, épuisement des ressources planétaires, vieillissement de la population, développement des talents, inquiétude sociale, télétravail, nouvelles technologies exigent un nouveau style de leadership. Nous devons donc préconiser un modèle où l'intelligence et les talents respectifs de tous et de toutes seront déployés dans la recherche de solutions à ces défis multidimensionnels qui existent déjà et qui se flexibles vraisemblablement dans le futur. Bien décidé à renforcer le leadership féminin et permettre aux femmes de nos pays respectifs d'être en phase avec la 4e révolution industrielle, nous devons leur faciliter l'accès au monde du numérique, notamment le rôle de l'intelligence artificielle dans l'amélioration des performances économiques de nos pays, comme par exemple le changement portant sur l'immersion de notre jeunesse dans les startups, incubateurs et leur faciliter l'entrepreneuriat social en tant que moteur d'une croissance économique et sociale intégrée et durable. En étant qu'ambassadeur de la cause, en pensant à des nouvelles applications dans une approche plus inclusive dans cette prise en charge, grâce à des vecteurs de sensibilisation via la création, l'art et le digital, et sortir des sentiers battus pour avoir un impact et surmonter les obstacles à l'inclusion des jeunes qui ont façonné un renouveau socio-économique ainsi que les normes et valeurs sociales, et poussant à l'innovation. Pour conclure, je crois profondément que pour garantir toutes les chances de réussite, tout effort de développement juste et durable, nous devons associer pleinement les femmes et les jeunes filles à tous les niveaux, mais aussi en milieu rural, en développant et en investissant dans leur autonomisation. Si des avancées en matière législative et juridique sont une condition nécessaire pour faire reculer un tant soit peu le système traditionnel de répartition des tâches selon le genre et le rapport de domination masculin dans la société, ces avancées n'en consistent pas pour autant une condition suffisante. La position de la femme tunisienne, ses conditions de vie, sans accès au travail, aux services, sont largement surdéterminées par son apport à l'homme. Elle a assigné successivement au statut de fille, puis d'épouse, puis de mère, mais jamais à proprement parler de femme en soi et pour soi. En d'autres termes, des avancées juridiques progressistes ne peuvent engendrer à elles seules un sens culturel quantitatif au sein de la société de nature à éliminer toutes les formes de domination à l'égard de la femme. Il faut donc mettre en œuvre, selon nous, d'autres politiques et programmes d'action qui offrent de nouveaux espaces de libération de la parole et de l'action aux femmes. Politiques concrètes qui viendront progressivement à bout des résistances conservatrices. Aussi, nous devons travailler pour une économie progressiste et féministe dans nos pays, comme la création d'un marché du travail inclusif et égalitaire entre les sexes, la reconnaissance de la valeur de l'économie des soins, la promotion des pratiques commerciales équitables au genre et l'intégration de la dimension de genre dans les transitions économiques. Car la réalisation d'une économie féministe est plus importante que jamais à la lumière des impacts sociaux et économiques de la pandémie Covid-19. D'où cette exigence d'investir dans une économie juste et durable qui fonctionne pour tous, quel que soit leur sexe. Une économie inclusive et juste, guidée par les principes de l'égalité des sexes, de l'intersectionnalisation, de la diversité, de la solidarité, de la dignité, du bien-être, des droits de l'homme, de la démocratie et de l'état de droit. En bref, une économie construite pour de vraies personnes avec de réelles préoccupations et aspirations, pas seulement pour le profit. Il reste encore un long chemin à parcourir pour changer la prise de décision macroéconomique établie. Et les rôles de genre est un système patriarcal qui défavorise les femmes. Toutes les voix féministes sont nécessaires. Alors, nous comptons sur la solidarité de nous tous et d'autres qui croient à l'égalité. Il reste encore beaucoup d'actions conjointes à explorer au sein des organisations internationales comme ce que vous avez entrepris afin de mettre sur l'agenda international et national la question de l'égalité des chances et du genre objectif nécessaire de paix et de développement durable. Je vous remercie. Thank you very much pour votre attention et à très bientôt pour concrétiser nos espoirs et nos rêves pour un monde différent, un monde plus équitable et juste. Thank you, Mr.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your kind speech. Although your staff has sent me the English speech, and we will place it while it will be goes in a video, your translation. Obviously, you are heading that important ministry which has the responsibility to protect the women, to protect the seniors.
Yes.
And
yes.
I am remembering my very dearest friend, Prime Minister Hamadi Jabal Ali. May Allah bless his soul, rest in peace, and grant him Jannatul Firdaus. He was my guest here in Pakistan, and I've been in Tunis many times, and I believe that the democracy and for the protection of human rights, the Tunisia was the first country who protected them and people. They protected the institution for the people and for the human rights. In the Arab world, it was the first country. I remember it. So I hope you will continue to serve the peoples, and one day you will be in Pakistan too as our guest.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move towards the other. Obviously on my WhatsApp, my fellow participants, my colleagues, they are messaging me and I am responding them. Now we have to have a passion, and the passion and patience. These things move together to energize us. So we have to have a passion and patience together. So let's giving a floor to a very young, energetic diplomat, founder, and founder of the organization, which is a very much investing in a women analyst, women rights and youth development advocate, Right Honorable Miss Fatma Al Ansar of Mali. Floor is yours. Fatma, please unmute yourself. First, unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Hi, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Excellency Ambassador. I'm very, very honored to be here. And to be honest, when I saw the flyers, I was like, yes, women empowerment. Like most of the speakers were women, so you are actually already doing a good job in empowering women, making sure that we have space to express our voices, and hoping that those voices will be implemented so that we will implement fully the agenda to advance women empowerment in the world. So to be honest, when Ambassador Mohamed contacted me and asked me to be a speaker and then to be talking about the challenges that youth and women are facing today, and what can we do? And I actually was reflecting mainly about my own life and my own story. And I feel like the challenging that young people, children, youth, and women were facing 20 years ago are quite similar to the one they are facing today as well. I'm saying this, I'm a founder of an organization which is called Tiwat Peace Network. Tiwat Peace Network seeks to train young women in Africa to be peace ambassadors in the different regions. And this idea came to me because of my own life experiences I'm gonna present myself. I am Fatima Al-Ansar. I'm originally from Mali. I'm from the northern Mali region, Timbuktu. I'm a Tuareg. So I was raised in a very conservative, traditional family in a Tuareg culture in northern Mali. I was born in 1992. During that time, 1992 to 1995, until today, actually, much haven't changed. Education for young women like me was not something that a young woman would even dream of. Education was like an utopic dream. But I was lucky enough that my father joined the army, and we left the northern Mali region, and we went and lived in Bamako, in Kati, the military camp. And every summer, then I was able to have access to education. So every summer I would go back to the northern Mali region, to my community, and teach those other young girls what I learned at school. I would teach them how to read and write. Since then, I knew that education, it's what I wanted to bring back to my community, but I wanted to bring back a safe education. So I really worked hard. I fought. I met with the Minister of Education when I was 17 only, and I requested to have my own land to build school for young girls in my community. So he was like, how come a young girl like me can just come to my room, my office, and be like, I build a school? Do you even know how the education system works? Do you even know what are like the challenges that the Malian education system is facing now? Without even like doubting. And he was like, can you even run a school? Do you know how the school system works? I was like, yeah, why not? So he was like, I'm gonna let you run a summer school. If you successfully run that school, I'm gonna give you land to build your own school. So I successfully ran that summer school. So I got my land to build my own school for young girls in Northern Mali. I was able to build the school in 2012, but guess what? The school was destroyed after 1 year of running. The school was destroyed by the rebel group, because I don't know if you guys have following what happened in 2012 in Northern Mali. The Islamic group, the rebel group, took over the whole region for 1 year, and they have destroyed a lot of schools, especially girls' schools. And since then, I was like, yeah, my ambition is to give education to young women, give education to young girls. I think it should go beyond just giving them education. It should go beyond giving them safe education. And I think that's what a lot of young women, at least in a conflict zone region, are facing today. Although women represents the majority of those affected by conflicts, they have been historically been excluded from formal process dealing with war and peace. In time of conflict, the risk of experiencing violence when leaving one home and community to perform their daily activity is very high. And I have personally experienced that, and I have close friends, close family who have experienced that too. Currently in Mali and in a lot of like conflict zone areas, young girls are used as a weapon of war, and also they are used as an exchange during negotiation process. They have been sold, and despite all this disproportional impact of conflict on women, they are still largely excluded from peace negotiation and peace building process. And I have to say, Mali have been going through a conflict since I was born to today, but for the first time this year, we have women taking part of have a seat on the peace building negotiation table, because Mali have signed a peace agreement with the rebel groups in 2015, and since 2015 to 2021, no women have ever taken a seat on that meeting, and we have to fight for it. And it took a youngest female Minister of Foreign Affairs, and me, I was in her cabinet as her special advisor, and it took us and other young women as well to really fight to convince the government to look for funding and to give space for women in that decision-making table, because there is no other people who know the experience that women are facing more than women themselves. And I have to say, even with the international law, the international human rights, and all these conventions, gender equality is essential for sustainable development and sustainable peace. Women represent, at least in Africa, more than half of 1.2 billion of the African population. To be more specific, around 600 million African are women. And there are so many major standing barriers to achieve gender equality. And one of the biggest one is lack of access to education and poor retention of girls in school, economic inclusion and financial system that perpetuates the discrimination, limited participation in political and public life, gender-based violence, harmful cultural practices, and exclusion of women from peace-building tables. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, an international treaty adopted in 1979 by the United General Assembly, which is described as the International Bill of Rights for Women. And it is a global policy on gender equality. This is a very important international convention which was signed and ratified by numerous countries as of today. If my numbers is right, around 178 countries have signed it and ratified it. But if I'm correct, how many of those countries that have signed and ratified this important treaty fully apply it in their respective country? I would tell you there are very few countries. We have to come up with a good mechanism to respect and apply the treaties that we have signed. There is one thing to make law, but the most important thing is to apply it fully as well. So I demand to different stakeholders, global policy influencers, educational activists to be fully engaged to the implementation of Women Global Bill of Rights. The global development and global peace depend on how we treat and integrate women and girls in our society. We should immediately provide women and girls with the space and opportunity to participate fully in their community from the top to the lowest level. When we empower women, when we empower girls, we don't only empower one person, we empower a whole community and we empower a whole society. So we need to take time to invest on our young women and give space to young people, to young women at the decision-making table, and make sure that the law that we implement, we follow up and we make sure that it's fully implemented in our respective countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. We are very much proud on you and your working in the very difficult countries. Yes, 130 countries have signed and ratified the ICC convention, and of course, International Human Rights Commission is one of the partner organizations with ICC. And we are making sure that the ICC should have a jurisdiction and strong